Thanks for taking the time for this dialogue discussion. Today we have a very important dialogue discussion. If I had to give this a title, I would call it Nickels, Noise, and Numbers. I want you to follow along with us in the notes. You can click over on the notes and you will see the scripture references, the main points that I'm going to make, and I'll make it very simple for you to follow with us. Our study will come from John chapter 19, verses 1 through 16. And this is an excellent opportunity to develop and to help your children, to help your children's friends, to develop the ability of dealing healthily with peer pressure. The Bible addresses timely issues and gives us some wonderful principles that can help us to be who we need to be, even in the face of adversity. So let's walk through this dialogue discussion methodically. If you have a question, just type it in the chat room and we'll answer it for you. And if you have a prayer request at any point, feel free to do that as well. Or if you have a comment that you'd like to share with the audience, feel free to do that. In this text, Pilate discovered that Jesus was innocent. Listen to Pilate's statement in John chapter 18 and verse 38. Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" And after saying that, he came out again to the Jews and said to them, "I find no grounds at all for charges in this case." Pay close attention to Pilate's statement. He said, "I find no grounds at all." None. And then Pilate came out again and said to them, "See, I am bringing him out to you so that you will know that I find no grounds at all for charges in this case." Jesus then came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe, and Pilate said to them, "Behold the man." So when the chief priest and the officers saw him, they shouted, saying, "Crucify, crucify." Pilate said to them, "Take him yourself and crucify him, for I find no grounds for charges in this case." John chapter 19, verses 4 through 6. But in spite of Pilate finding no grounds to charge Jesus, yet he released him to be crucified. John chapter 19 and verse number 16. How is it that Pilate, in the midst of innocence, after having examined Jesus, how is it that he made this awful mistake? How is it that he gave in? How is it that he caved in? Well, Pilate surrendered to the peer pressure from the Jews. He made the same mistake that you and I make on a daily basis. We surrender to peer pressure from those who are in our circle. Listen to this biblical text. As a result of this, Pilate made efforts to release him. But the Jews shouted, saying, "If you release this man, you are not a friend of Caesar. Everyone who makes himself out to be a king opposes Caesar." Therefore, when Pilate heard these words, pay close attention to that. What words? "You're not a friend of Caesar." When he heard these words, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judgment seat and Pilate at a place called the Pavement, but in Hebrew, it's called Gabbatha, John 19, verses 12 and 13. What happened? The same thing that happens to you and me. Our peers are those from whom we seek the favor or approval. Psychologists call them our significant others. We call them our peers. Peer pressure influences both young and old. Peer pressure influences saint and sinner. There is no person that is off limits to peer pressure. The influence of peer pressure may be constructive. Listen to this biblical text. Let's hold firm to the confidence of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. And let's consider how to encourage one another in love and good deeds. Hebrews 10, 23 and 24. In that context, peer pressure is constructive. We encourage our peers to do what's right. But peer pressure may be destructive. Listen to this biblical text. Then Peter said to her, why is it that you have agreed together to put the Spirit of the Lord to the test? Behold, the feet of those who have buried your husband are at the door, and they will carry you out as well. Acts chapter 5 and verse number 9. Ananias, Sapphira, gave in to the peer pressure of her husband, and he persuaded her to agree to an erroneous amount for which they had sold the property. So peer pressure may be constructive, peer pressure may be destructive. But I want to tell you, you can successfully resist the influence of destructive peer pressure. Destructive peer pressure is all around, everywhere you look. So how do I resist it? Let's talk about that technique. First thing I want to recommend that you do if you're going to resist destructive peer pressure, and we learned this right here from the Pilate and Jesus story, you need to investigate the nickels. Yes, investigate the nickels, the money. Yes, investigate the money. Because money is often the avenue through which our peers influence us. With the money, with the nickels, the Jews influenced Pilate. John chapter 19 and Luke chapter 23 will underscore that. See, Caesar received the tax money and allocated Pilate's financial resources. So Caesar was in charge of the monies that Pilate had at his disposal. Therefore, the Jews attacked Pilate's allegiance to Caesar. Remember earlier we read, they said, you're no friend of Caesar. And the text said, when Pilate heard that, he just could not handle that accusation. See, nickels destroyed Pilate's better judgment. He then surrendered to the peer pressure of the Jews. Listen again. As a result of this, Pilate made efforts to release him. But the Jews shouted, saying, if you release this man, you are not a friend of Caesar. Everyone who makes himself out to be king opposes Caesar. Therefore, when Pilate heard these words, what words? You're not a friend of Caesar. He brought Jesus out and sat down on the judgment seat at a place called the Pavement. John 19, verse 12 and 13. So then you must investigate the nickels. And then you need to learn how to ignore the noise. Investigate the nickels, ignore the noise. Often noise is the avenue through which our peers influence us. Believe it or not, with noise, the Jews influenced Pilate. Listen again to the biblical text. And the governor said to them, that's Pilate, which of the two do you want me to release for you? They said, Barabbas. Pilate said to them, then what shall I do with Jesus, who is called Christ? They all said, crucify him. But he, now that's Pilate, said, why? What evil hath he done? Yet they kept shouting all the more, saying, crucify him. Now, when Pilate saw that he was accomplishing nothing, but rather that a riot was starting, he took water and washed his hands in front of the crowd, saying, I am innocent of this man's blood. You yourselves see to it. And all the people replied, his blood shall be on us and our children. Then he released Barabbas for them. But after having Jesus flogged, he handed him over to be crucified. Matthew 27, verses 21 through 26. Notice, Pilate said, what evil hath he done? They never answered the question. They just kept shouting, crucify him. Notice, it was not a logical, rational answer given. It was no rational reason. It was nothing but noise. Nothing but noise. Pilate allowed the noise to drive him to make a most foolish decision. Pilate attempted to stop a riot by releasing a murderous rioter. Now notice, when Pilate saw that a riot was about to take place, he knew he had to do something. Well, what's he going to do? Is he going to do the right thing, or is he going to do the emotional thing? We now know from history that he did the emotional thing. He surrendered Jesus to be crucified, and he did so because of the noise. So we need to learn to ignore the noise. Listen to the biblical text, Mark 15 and verse 7. And the one named Barabbas had been imprisoned with the rebels who had committed murder in the revolt. Now pay close attention to this. Pay close attention. Pilate saw that a riot was about to take place. So to pacify the crowd, what does he do? He said, who do you want me to release? They said, Barabbas. And what did Pilate do? He released Barabbas. Now think about this for a moment. How do you stop a riot? By releasing from prison a murderous rioter. That's what he did. Why did he do that? Because of the noise. Listen to the biblical text again. And they cried out all together, saying, away with this man and release to us Barabbas. He was one of those who had been thrown into prison for a revolt that took place in the city and for murder. But Pilate, wanting to release Jesus, addressed them again. But they kept on crying out, saying, crucify, crucify him. And he said to them a third time, why? What has this man done wrong? I have found in his case no ground for a sentence of death. Therefore, I will punish him and release him. But they were insistent with loud voices, demanding that he be crucified. And their voices began to prevail. Now notice, not their rationale, just the volume of their noise. And so Pilate decided to have their demand carried out. And he released the man from whom they were asking, who had been thrown into prison for a revolt and murder, but he handed Jesus over to their will. Luke 23, verses 18 through 25. My friend, noise destroyed Pilate's better judgment, and he then surrendered to the peer pressure. My friend, noise will destroy our better judgment, and we will make a most ignorant decision. Pilate did so in an effort to stop a riot. He releases from prison a murderous rioter. So, my friend, if we're going to successfully resist peer pressure, we need, number one, to investigate the nickels. Number two, ignore the noise. And then number three, interpret the numbers. Yes, the numbers. You've heard people say, everybody's doing it. Everyone's doing it. Our children say to us, everyone's going to the game. And what do? We give in to the numbers, because numbers are avenues through which our peers influence us. With the numbers, the Jews influenced Pilate. Matthew 27 and verse 28. But the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowds to ask for Barabbas and to put Jesus to death. It's noticeable. Only one person, a woman, Pilate's wife, spoke on behalf of Jesus. Matthew 27 and verse 19, this is what we read. And while he, that's Pilate, was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent him a message saying, see that you have nothing to do with that righteous man, for last night I suffered greatly in a dream because of him. Her attempt to solve the problem by appealing to the wisdom of her husband, but Pilate's attempt to solve the problem by consenting with the majority. And the numbers destroyed Pilate's better judgment. He then surrendered to the peer pressure. How did Pilate end up where he was? The nickels, the noise, and the numbers. My friend, it really doesn't matter how many people have making that decision. If it's not a good decision for you, don't make it. Don't allow the peer pressure. Learn to stand alone when necessary, when it's to your advantage. If you're going to resist peer pressure, you must come to the point where you enjoy standing alone. I taught my children, there are some people who follow the style, but others set the style. And those who set the style must learn to stand alone until the style has been set. My friend, you can successfully resist the influence of destructive peer pressure. How do you do that? Investigate the nickels by asking, is my integrity for sale? Is it for sale? May I earn sufficiently without selling my integrity? These are questions you need to ask. Ask yourself. You know the answer. Where will this trend eventually lead me? Remember, unethical and unfair gain is shortly lived and shallowly enjoyed. You look all around us, those who deal in the drug world. It's shortly lived. Before long, they're in prison or killed, and it is shallowly enjoyed. They are driving the Mercedes, but they're looking over their shoulder for the bullet. So you must interpret the nickels and learn, my friend, to ignore the noise. Well, how do I ignore the noise? You ignore the noise by asking, what are these people really saying? Can you imagine what would have happened if Pilate had said, what are these people really saying? Are they arguing wisely or foolishly? Yes, they were just arguing foolishly. Pilate said, what evil has he done? What has he done wrong? They never answered the question. They just kept saying, crucify him, crucify him. My friend, remember, you can say no and not feel guilty. Learn how to say no and not feel guilty. Interpret the nickels. Investigate the nickels. Ignore the noise and then interpret the numbers. Interpret the numbers. Here's some questions to ask. Who are these people who say this? If Pilate had said, who are these people who are saying crucify Jesus? He could have concluded that these are his adversaries, and they are adversaries without any fair basis to be in opposition. So who are these people who are saying this? Are they losers who simply desire company? When people say to you, let's commit a crime, who are these people? Are they people who want company in prison? Who are these? Are these losers? When your children go to school and their friends say, let's skip class, let's vape, let's do whatever, who are these people? Are these children that are on their way to college? Are they on their way to a good career? Are they on their way to failure in prison? Remember, the Lord does not have the majority on his side. The Lord's only had the majority on his side twice in human history. When he created Adam and Eve, shortly for a period of time, they were on his side. Before long, the world was in error significantly. So much that God destroyed the world through Noah's ark. And then after that destruction, he had 8 people on his side just for a short while. So God's really never had the majority on his side for an extended period of time. So don't worry about the majority. Don't worry. Don't concern yourself. Interpret the numbers. Who are these people? They are not with God. Now, Pilate had the power to release Jesus. John chapter 19 and verse 10. So Pilate sent to him, are you not speaking to me? Do you not know that I have the authority to release you and I have authority to crucify you? He had the power. And initially he had the will. John chapter 19 and verse 12. As a result of this, Pilate made efforts to release him. But the Jews shouted, saying, if you release this man, you're not a friend of Caesar. Everyone who makes himself out to be a king opposes Caesar. I want you to notice something interesting. Pilate had the will and he had the power, but he could never put it together with the willpower. He never had the willpower. He never was able to get the two together. Let Jesus help you get it together. My friend, God wants you to stand to resist the influence of destructive peer pressure. Don't let it happen. Drill this lesson into your children. That's how you keep them out of trouble. But you got to model it for them. Do you make decisions because of the nickels? Do you make decisions because of the noise? Do you cave in because of the numbers? When our children see us surrendering to our peer pressure, they learn to surrender to their peer pressure. Model early in life for your children. Walk the road alone. Eagles don't group. They don't flock. Buzzards flock, but eagles soar alone. My friend, resist destructive peer pressure. It's not worth it to surrender.